Okay, so this is a quick episode of the PlaceOS podcast. I am here with Caspian. Hello.
Howdy, I'm Caspian.
We're going to talk tech. We're going to get really tech. I find that in my meetings, I always have this phrase where I'm like, I'm going to get too technical for some and not technical enough for others. And I think that sort of word of warning is exactly what I'm going to say here, because we can get deep and alienate some of our audience, or we can only scratch the surface and people want us to go deeper. So what do you want to talk about?
Well, I am probably the least client-facing member of the PlaceOS team.
Which is perfect.
Perfect. So I'm like, what about my job is accessible to our clients? Well, I guess I am informed by our company vision, and that's probably the most that I interact with clients. So it is my job to make our platform accessible from a developer standpoint, and that's not necessarily who our clients are. It's, I guess, the developers who respond to their own specifications.
Let me take a step back. And just to emphasize your point that you're not client-facing, that was a really deliberate move by us. And you were the first employee that we could isolate in that way. And that was almost like, this whole concept of the lean startup and minimal viable product. We essentially adopted that without realizing it when we started this company. But you end up getting stuck if you don't make a change, and you get stuck providing services, because if you're working directly with a customer, building a product in MVP format and getting their feedback and continue to build the product, it means you're customer facing, and at a certain point that doesn't scale. And we got to a point where we had to make a decision: well, do we want to be a product company or do we want to be a services company? And I mean, we could make a really healthy business just custom building things for workplaces and buildings. But for us, that wasn't why we started in the first place.
Yeah.
And we realized, hey, we're acting like a services company, but we should be a product/platform company. So we brought you in, and I think the conversation was like, we're excited about this because we can build walls around you and keep you away from getting stuck in projects. And I think we've done a pretty good job at that. You do get involved sometimes in projects.
Yeah, sometimes, but that keeps me sane and actually focused on the fact that we are a client-based company. We are building products for actual clients, and the way that my job role is structured does keep me isolated from clients, but that's the way it should be. I'm a software engineer. I don't talk to people, except you, John, around here. But it's a very good role because I get to focus, and I get to focus on the product roadmap. I get to build features that, I can see the company vision in each feature that I build, and that I see the value for our clients in our product roadmap, and it's all part of like an open source inspired workflow. In fact, all of our products are open source, and that's a big thing that attracts me to PlaceOS. And open source is incredibly well structured to create a democracy of the good idea. And I think that that's what we do at PlaceOS, is we try to have a roadmap that isn't inspired by client needs, but it's also very much informed by developer needs. And that's not just our developer needs, it's the needs of the implementers for our partners and clients. And I think that symbiotic relationship is really at the core of like our open source ethos.
We consume a lot of open source technology, but we're also contributing, and that sort of goes hand in hand, right? If you're part of an open source ecosystem, you sort of feel this desire to give back to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, let's speak specifically. What sort of open source frameworks are you using or contributing to right now?
Well, I am trying to actively contribute to CrystalLang, which is our language that we use for our backend. It's quite a young language. It's been around for a little bit less than 10 years. It's like production ready. It's about to be in its version 1 release, but it's just a remarkably simple code base for how effective it is, and it provides us incredible iteration speed. It takes all of the patterns from Ruby. So that's a very, very, very established language. In fact, our platform was previously implemented in Ruby, and it's quite a low barrier for engineers to contribute to. I've made 2 pull requests in the last week to Crystal. That's directly to a language. It's maybe like we measure like popularity on GitHub by stars, and it's like about 20K stars. It's a very popular language, and it's like I get to work with tools here at PlaceOS that you probably wouldn't touch in different companies, and that is because we're not afraid of open source, because we know the benefits of open source. It is core to how we function as a.
We're also, I mean, with Steve as our co-founder, he's always adopted technology quickly. How did you find coming into this company when we're like, oh yeah, we're all in with Crystal Lang? Was that, were you like, why?
I mean, I was why, but I think the why was coming from a good place, and it was answered very effectively by Steve. It's a, like, okay, all programming languages are bad, are terrible. Programming shouldn't exist, but some are much better than others. And Crystal, it really ticks all the boxes. It's fast, it's easy to write, it doesn't destroy knowledge built up by just programming in other languages, and Steve pretty much like within 10 minutes, I think he'd erased all doubt I had in my mind, because it's just, you just see some things that are technically perfect, or at least contain the kernel of technical excellence, and I could recognize that, and I think Steve is not one to take technical decisions lightly, and he can very easily, effectively defend it. So, and I'm also now a defender of Crystal. I will defend it until I die. It's beautiful.
I've had a couple of questions come up from our partners, or more statements really, and I answered one the other day. They're like, we have a lot of Ruby developers. We don't have any Crystal developers. And my short response was, well, either did we. But it's very, you can take Ruby developers and that's a good starting point. Would one of the limitations be it's so new, there's not a lot of examples, there's not a lot of documentation? I think one of our recent sort of intern graduates, a junior developer now, mentioned that when she started here, this is Gab, when she started here, there wasn't a lot of examples of Crystal. Is that putting people off? Is that just a problem that will solve itself? Are we solving that problem because PlaceOS is so documented?
Yeah, I think we're quite documented, and I think those kind of problems you tend to encounter anywhere where you're doing new technology. And while there might be tens of thousands of Ruby examples on how to build a web app, that doesn't really mean anything when you're building smart building technology and you're interfacing with the built environment through drivers. Like these are new problems you have to solve. And if you are a Ruby developer, you're not going to have much difficulty approaching our interfaces because they are Ruby-esque. In fact, it will probably behave much more like Ruby in the way that you would expect it to. And combined with our good documentation, it's not any more difficult than writing or approaching a new programming problem in general. So it's...
Yeah, you can't always just expect to solve a problem by finding 10 different examples and gluing them all together. If the language of the framework is flexible enough and you're a problem solver, you could do it in the right way, not just gluing everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the solving by Stack Overflow is problematic. Because if you're finding the answer there, you're probably missing a skill that requires you to find when something's wrong, fundamentally wrong. Like you need to have finding the right answer is pretty much halfway to actually knowing the solution. I don't know if that came across clearly, but yeah.
I mean, it's funny when people that are not programmers think of programming. They think of movies where you're writing equations on glass and and trying to solve problems at this like mathematical level, when really most programmers are just thinking about logically solving problems, and the programming is just the tool to do so, and not the only tool available. And I think one point we can make about PlaceOS is we actually, well, you in particular, do all the coding, so our partners don't have to. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it can be settings, and that's just like JSON and scripting and things like that.
Yeah, and like the fact that we are an open source company, it's no knowledge is wasted. Like when we have a project where we might need to implement a new driver, that goes into the pool of our drivers that have been implemented, and then it's just part of the platform and increases the power of our integrations. And so it's like you write it once, it's effectively simply tested. It's part of our platform. In fact, any piece of code that goes into our open source drivers that might be written by a partner will be rigorously reviewed by us.
Yeah.
And we are contributors to Crystal. Like I've contributed to Crystal. Steve's contributed to Crystal.
Yeah.
In fact, like almost all of our developers have contributed. So I wouldn't have any.
This is one of the upsides of open source as well, is even the processes, like the Git process, etc., that it adopts typically is just really great quality control. And let's say we weren't using any open sources or just private repositories. There's no sort of guarantee we're following those processes. But I feel like the more open source it is, the more well documented, the better the process has to be.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's one of the things one of our other developers, Kim, it clicked with me when I sat in on a presentation he did. There's two things that clicked with me that I stole from him. It's open source doesn't mean free. A lot of people think, oh, it's open source, it's just free.
Yeah.
No, it's more the IP is just treated differently, and it's just a more transparent method with multiple contributors building an ecosystem around it. But then this really well-defined process is what, I'm like, yeah, that's great. I'm glad we are an open source company with this process of transparency, quality control, the ability to have partners, branch from repositories, contribute their own thing, and it not affect anything we're doing unless we review it and want it to.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's very, very symbiotic and very productive as a way of thinking.
Yeah. And imagine doing it any other way, I just would need so many more resources. And so one last thing I want to end on, you mentioned developing to our company vision. How are you getting that input, and what are you excited about? And what do you think our vision is? What is your vision? What are your goals developing for PlaceOS?
Well, the main way we interact through it interact with the roadmap is via GitHub. We use issues, roadmaps, and we can organize how products will be rolled out via that. I've seen the shift in vision of PlaceOS towards becoming a strict product-based platform, and anything that enables that in terms of reproducibility and ease of deployment and just pure, regardless of client, but developer experience. This is mainly for our partners. Anything that enables that makes us more effective as a product, and I think iterating continuously on that is just our role as a product company, to just continuously improve the scalability and the ease of use of our platform, and to get our single role which is to be an integrations platform and create experiences.
And I guess those experiences, if we're focusing just on the platform and the integration, it's really up to our partners, our customers to define. And if we're flexible enough and scalable enough, it can go in areas we're not even imagining, perhaps. I mean, we do a lot in workplace because there's a lot of trends driving that, market trends and just, cultural trends of how people work or how they want to work, and COVID-19 and all this stuff that comes into play. But maybe there's another area where there's a need for automation via integrations. That could be anything. And one day a partner might come along and we just haven't thought of that. I don't know, maybe it's automating roller coasters to make them more efficient. Whatever it may be, it could be completely separate. That's what I like about shifting to product, is it doesn't become our expertise in a particular industry vertical.
Yes. I think a little sparkle in my eyes is smart cities, I think.
Yeah.
And I definitely see the concepts within our platform very transferable to the concepts of smart cities. And I think that's a little ache in my heart that I would love to fulfill.
That's a big one because there's a technical element to it, silos and challenges to break through there, but there's also the process. How do you sell to a city?
Yeah.
And sell not just commercially. I mean, like sell the concept and the ideas. A workplace or a building is usually one owner, one landlord, one tenancy. There's decision makers. Yeah. But if you're trying to link a whole city together, infrastructure, transport, multiple smart buildings, it's a difficult thing. It's not a technology challenge more than it is a industry business related challenge.
Absolutely.
And that's one I have conversations with people, and no one's really got a good answer on how we solve that. I think it's maybe starting with smart precincts. So a collection of buildings and connecting that to city systems. But if we can solve that, that's a big one for us to tackle.
Absolutely. Cool.
Yep. Well, thanks for chatting.
Thanks, John.